treason, insurrection, coup d'etat. These terms have been flagrantly and casually thrown about. And both sides are now officially guilty of accusing each other of this same set of things. But my question, is either side really actually trying to achieve those things?
Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Good morning, friends and fam. It's 10:49, Friday, January 8th, 2021. There is a delicate, almost fragile part of my inner being that cannot believe it is truly the future. The future is now, and this is what the future is. That's not what I was going to open the show with. Good morning, folks. It's 10:50 a.m., Friday, January 28th. As I was contemplating at the beginning of the show, does anybody really know what time it is? No, sorry. Is either side really trying to achieve the thing they're being accused of by the other side? Or is this just how political echo chamber theatrics work? Works? Work. What's the right way to conjugate that grammatically? Or is that just how political echo chamber theatrics, plural, work? Right? Because if it was singular, it would be works. Anyways, let's not get hung up on the silly grammar Nazi-ness. Nonsense. For I am not a grammar Nazi. I'm not any kind of Nazi. Thank you very much. Who are you calling a Nazi? Also, back the fuck up, people calling me a communist. Who are you calling a communist? Let's put a pin in that question. A big fat red pin. Pardon the almost pedantic, almost absurdly boring attempted humor there. And we'll put it up on the giant corkboard. Who are you calling communist? Because the other day, sometime in the last 48 hours, during this epic sweeping historicalness that has been raging at the capital of the two simultaneously coexisting nation states known as the United States of America and the Empire of Trumptopia, a meme that I really shoulda, coulda, woulda made within 48 hours to, a week of the actual event happening from which this image that the meme is based on comes from. It just hit me. And I've created it, but I have yet to publish it. But it totally relates to that question because it was almost a thing I was going to put on it. But anyways, I digress. Save that thought. January 6th, dear friends, besides being, if I may insert a personal note, and God forbid that this backfires on me in terms of the ways this could backfire on me. And that may not make sense, but it may make sense to others. January 6th, besides being my birthday eve, in other words, the day before my birthday, like Christmas Eve is the day before Christmas, or the evening before Christmas, January 6th was a wildly sort of unprecedented, yet not surprising and not so terribly unexpected historical moment in time of human chaos in action, in terms of interesting protest turned something else, civic disobedience, by a demographic of the population that lives in this bifurcated reality known as the Trumtopian empire formerly known as the United States of America. Mind you, to be clear and to dispel any misunderstandings right up front, I believe in everybody's right to protest in an orderly, passionate, meaningful way. And throughout my time as a commentator and observer of human current events and historical happenings, I have always noted that I cannot cross that line of openly endorsing violent choices. I can understand the way in which people from any political ideology can, have in the past, might in the future, are currently being convinced or convincing themselves or collectively moving themselves towards being seduced towards falling into the ego trap of, perhaps one possible way of phrasing it. I can understand why people turn to violence. Every time a person acts out as an individual or a collective of people act out as a collective of people with violence, I think I stand firm in my interesting, unique, slightly not what everybody else is doing position. Plenty of people are here with me in my, I don't want to call this, it's not center left. I don't know where we stand. We stand in that place that Rumi points to. And if you don't know Rumi, you're missing out on some beautiful poetry, which is also spiritual, thought-provoking content. Go check it out. But in one of his poems, he points to a place beyond the extremes, beyond good, right and wrong, beyond left and right. He phrases it in his own way, and its translations, of course, will vary from language to language, etc. As always, although I can't claim to have, in my actual, current real life incarnate avatar self, have learned all the different languages required to read the world's most beautiful spiritual poetry in the original. I wish that I could, and I aspire to someday, perhaps after maybe having made my fortune in the spiritual edutainment infoweb world, if there is such a market, be able to afford to either buy the virtual products or hire the in-person educators and teachers to learn those languages so that I may read Rumi in his original and all of the books included and excluded from the Bible in their original. Life goals, folks. Life goals. Priorities. Because as beautiful as the King James Version of the Bible may be, that's essentially, if not literally, actually Shakespeare writing it and editing it all himself, or managing a team of clandestine, playwrights of the time or poets of the time, organizing that translation. It definitely was of that lingua franca. It was of that moment in history and time and cultural context. And it was from writers and minds that thought and wrote and lived and breathed quite similarly to that person and or perhaps human collective that we point to with the historical name of William Shakespeare. And of course, there's all the caveats, which I'm well aware of, friends, of the edits and changes and misattributions, etc., etc. That's why, right? Thumbs up. Read the shit in its original language whenever possible. And if you can't, try to find scholars, multiple sources that have translated it into your own language, and find and cross-reference that shit and find your most sincere understanding of the words in those closest to, a couple of degrees away translations. But I digress. Wow, how did I get to that point? I don't remember. But it is salient as we spiral through the what's the word? Have you ever seen one of those images that are just spiraling into many shapes, right? There's abstract ones and there's literal sacred geometry ones, right? Of the seed of life, tree of life, flower of life being drawn out by all the circles. That's the way I sort of, in a rough, organic, like plants branching up into the sky kind of way, imagine my brain sort of working through the themes over time. Or I'm cuckoo nut job, crazy robot from the future guy. I don't know, but I digress. January 6th. Oh, if I may be humorous for a minute, how I would have loved all of that to have been through synchronicity and different circumstances, fated to happen on other days, either before or after the anniversary of my arrival here to join you in observing the events on planet Dirt. But they did not. And so that is why, my dear friends, I must beg your forgiveness. I was not live on the air sharing with you my opinions, thoughts, and commentary about those historic events and many of the other, associated issues. But here we are today with just enough space and time for, indeed, I needed some of that, some of those two ingredients to process and to digest. And fear not, friends, I captured and indeed shared some of my in-the-moment, real-time, questions, thoughts, and variable sort of musings as things unfolded. To the best of my ability, as I like I do, roulette wheeled, hopscotch, flipped through the various mainstream media outlets and surveyed the topography of social media and online outlets. For those who may not understand, I am not a sheeple of the media. I understand the flaws and accusations, true, marginally inaccurate, or completely false, or otherwise, about media. And I've explained on multiple occasions, which I'm sure you'll come across, where I stand about it. And I shall not bore you with those tedious details now, but I digress. It is part of the design of my show. I am here to comment on that media which an average Joe Schmo schleb of a dude, surviving under the peculiar circumstances that I am surviving through the epic sweep of history that we're all living through together. Because, what else am I to do? I don't have the means at my disposal just yet to be, the creator of a brand empire and hire staff and journalists and investigators, etc. So here we are. As always, friends, my humble thanks for you joining me on this, my late 90s talk radio style talk show podcast, in which I give you my honest, sincere, unscripted, uncorrupted, as far as I'm concerned, because no one is paying me money. You know where I'm making my money? Here, on Sprecher, because you guys are listening. And the show is monetized, full disclosure. But no secret government agency. No, I don't believe, George, I ain't not. Wait, that's a double negative. That doesn't work. I am not to be a grammar Nazi, but I sure as fuck ain't. In all the ways I can assure you, my dear listeners, neither Soros nor your favorite multi-billionaire from any other corner of the political not polygraph, that's the wrong word. What's that square-shaped infograph of political spectrums called? It has a funny particular name. But no one from any corner of the political boxing arena is secretly or maliciously financing this show. I'm just a dude sitting at home talking to you on my iPad 6th gen that I gave myself for my birthday 5 years ago, or however many years ago it was. 4.5 years ago, 3 years ago. Oh, right. I did start this podcast before I bought this iPad, so whatever. It's the device I'm using now. However many years ago I got it. And so having declared that, because it's a disclaimer that I must, I think, unfortunately, repeat on occasion, for it is a fact of of truth. The only entities from which I am getting money, for full disclosure, folks, family, because it's 2020, 2021 survival mode. The Trump administration's interesting and severely not enough and very poorly timed stimulus, quote unquote, of satire, bunny ears of satire, stimulus checks, and the Sprecher platform podcast show monetization program. So my deepest, humblest, sincerest thanks. I don't think that statement violates my EULA. If it does, I'll come back and clean it up. Don't sue me. Don't ruin my life, friends. And don't steal my ideas, because as you may or may not know just yet, and you will realize once you get addicted to listening to my show, some of the content here is indeed me reading my attempts at creating my own comic book style literary universe, because I can't draw for shit. Although I have found some fun cyber life hack cheaty tools that once I get my fucking act together and clean the house, because I know my whole feng shui is off and I really gotta not just do spring cleaning a little early and do a deep scrub and all the usual things and all that, but I gotta re-feng shui my creative space a little bit. It's almost there. It's super close. But I digress. Enough of the personal details. I'm a little caught up on the personal side because it was my birthday, and we've all got our own shit going on, right? Our own lives are being intruded upon by these intense, important, and indeed historical events, dear friends. And that is what we're here to explore with a little bit of my eccentricity and snarkiness thrown in for funs and shits and giggles. Let me say right now that I am not here to point fingers or accuse anyone of treason, insurrection, or coup d'etat. I am here to question and ask the bizarre, and I know probably not quickly applauded or popular or on everybody's radar question of, is either side actually really trying to achieve any of those things? Because they've gotten their bases, both sides, to accuse each other of those things. And, political figures in the public realm of political discourse have accused each other's parties of those things. So we are in a US of Trumptopia standoff, right? USA of Trumptopia, the United States of Trumptopia, the United Empire of Trumptopia. I was toying with a question that I wanted to make a meme, because the opening question of today's show is, how will history remember this day, January 6th? And one of the things I think I posted on I did not post this on my Facebook. There's a lot of things that I posted on my Facebook that we're going to touch on and discuss a bit, I think, because if you're not currently signed up to my Facebook, you haven't seen them. And it's my own content already, so I can talk about it on my show. And also, they are my real authentic thoughts as captured either in my Note app, which is Evernote. The free version of is pretty excellent, by the way, folks. Again, authentics, real life endorsement. If you're looking for if you're a creative person and you just got a lot of thoughts that you're always jotting down and you use a certain Note app and you're just not happy with it and you're looking for something a little bit more robust that's free, that has a robust free version, and an even interestingly more robust, subscription version, if you've got the disposable at your recourse, their paid version sounds really nice too. That's Evernote. It's green. It has green colors. I don't know why that's important to me, but it's awesome. And I think the thing I appreciate most about it is that I've literally been dumping my brain out in notes and stuff on this for years, and it's never given me a size storage capacity issue. Of course, I'm not using a lot of graphics and stuff in it because I don't see the point, and I'd like my notes just text. But I digress. That's not the point of the show. The point of the show is WTF is actually going on, folks. Because, we are we not, dear friends and listeners, people who are indeed authentically about critically thinking, analyzing, not jumping to conclusions, not falling for ego trap bait, not goose stepping in line to any dogmatic paradigms of political ideology. Or aren't we? Or as I asked my friends once, some real life friends that I was hanging out with pre-COVID. By the way, if you know who these, if you know yourself to be these group of people, I miss you. I love you. Sorry we haven't talked. It's been a crazy year and a half. The moment we, this is all chill, we'll hang out again like it's been a blink of an eye. Because you're on that level of my friends list, folks. Gazuda, you know who you are. But I was hanging out with Gazuda. It's a group of people. They were jamming on some cool music. And some questions came up, of which I don't remember, and I probably don't want to talk about because that's something to do with their group. And some obstacles, right? And I asked, feeling very included, I asked them as if I was a member of their group, which I technically wasn't, but I was definitely included in the sort of overlapping Venn diagram circle of friends that come and go. And in that moment, I felt very welcome to say the following: are we or are we not magicians? And I mean this here now, friends. Life is magic. And that magic has a purpose. And that purpose is the healing of ourselves as individuals and the human species as a collective. So if we're going to question everything, and we recognize that as the core universal calling, then we must critique and analyze politics from that starting place. Or what the fuck are we wasting our time, right? That's what this show's about, friends. So, what is really going on when both sides of a duopoly, echo chamber, mirror of mirrors, hallway of mirrors system has got the most agitated members of their respective bases and some of their, leadership openly and actively, publicly, and also probably privately amongst, interpersonal conversations out there in the real world, accusing each other almost in perfect symmetry of the same egregious crime. And has anyone actually committed it? That's a deep probative question, which both sides must ask, not only of the other side, but of their own. And that, my dear friends, is one of the hard pills to swallow at the center of this historic micro chapter of the, first iteration of an attempt to establish a Trump-topian empire. Put a pin in that. I've already talked about it a little bit, but I want to come back to it after we've gotten some clarity, either on the approach to or just in the days after January 20th. Having said all that, dear friends, I entreat you to take a moment to let it all settle, cleanse the palate, and also reflect that as all this madness goes on, human beings in this bizarre, bifurcated multiverse of a country, if one can say that about the same place, if we're using the word place in its most broadest common understanding, that, there is deep suffering going on. While all these political shenanigans are happening, and yes, people were hurt and people suffered in the events of January 6th, but in the broader context, let us not forget Let us not forget to always not be overwhelmed, not be depressed, not be, lose hope because of that fact, but honor it and sit with it and share space with it so that it may bring gravitas and not hysteria to the public discourse of events as they continue to unfold. Right, that was my attempt to transition and hand it over to our delightfully stoic and as yet to be illustrated animatronic DJ Zed with a deep dubstep 101 remix live loop-de-loop track he entitled The Deeper the Better. Some days, even the most cliche of cliches become true. The way a broken clock stuck at 1:45 is right twice a day. Today, the last 48 hours has been one of those times. And quite comically, I just blanked on the cliche I was thinking of. Maybe it'll come back to me. It will. Knock on wood. What cliche was I thinking? There's totally a cliche happening here that's sad but true, but sad and true. And it's suddenly lost. It's suddenly gone. The problems of transdimensional metaphysics work at 4 a.m. I kid, I jest. I've always had crap memory. I have too many thoughts at once. So I'll be kind of looking at one and trying to hold the other, and then 3 more come tumbling through, and then it's like, wait, hold on a second, I was really into that one. And then the other 3 that are the newest are like complaining that 2 more are on the way, in terms of, interesting thoughts that sometimes are related, sometimes are not. Thus the weirdly spirally nature of the way I share my thoughts on my bizarre, humble, rough and tumble, diamond in the rough around the edges, amateur, as in I do it for the passion, not for the money just yet. Although I'd love to do it for the money too, folks. Podcast show that you love to listen to, the Almost Daily Zencast, with its special segment, Good Morning Trumptopia. Folks, this is the first thing that happened to me when I woke up January 6th. And January 6th will become one of those days that, right, boom, full circle. What was the cliche? The cliche is the saying that this day or this event or this thing or this person will go down in infamy, right? But it is so true. January 6th will go down in history as a day that will be remembered for quite some time in that way that we mean by infamy. And here we are. For no matter where you were and how you took it in, it's astounding. The things that happened, right? And the things that were done. And the plain, old-fashioned sort of like, and forgive me, I don't mean to step on anybody's toes, but none of this needed to happen or unfold in the way that it did. But I digress. Step back. There's a lot of problems, and there's a lot of deep implications about what happened January 6th, the various, the meaning of the whole confluence of events, up to and including the wild and curious fact that may or may not really deserve too much, a lot of praise, that Vice President Mike Pence administered and performed his ceremonial duties as president of the Congress, or of the Senate, whichever it is he's the president of, for the vice president is the president of either the whole Congress or the Senate as a chamber of Congress, right? I always just get confused about which is which. I think it's the whole Congress. Anyways, that part's sort of like curious, interesting, but irrelevant ultimately. He did his job, and he did not comply with doing the proposed bidding of Donald Trump. As Donald Trump himself implied he wanted Pence to do in various instances of his overt public communications. I will admit to you folks that I slept in on January 6th because other than being my own personal prolonged holiday week, I don't party much, in all honesty. I sometimes attend events, but I may not. But I'm not actually partying. And when I do, it's almost the most often thing is like New Year's. I think I've already rambled about that a bit, probably on New Year's or in and around New Year's. But I do, and I don't do holidays in the normal sort of typical way that they're done. No offense, not judging anybody. I do my own thing, right? Isn't that what freedom is? Isn't that what we're all hollering about? In some way or form, or not necessarily just holidays, but you get what I'm saying. From New Year's till the 8th, or usually, actually, it's New Year's till the first Monday after my birthday, to be blunt. And if my birthday lands on a Monday or the day before Monday, then it's the following Monday, although I kind of start sliding back in. Maybe I give myself 3 or 4 more days and do it on Wednesday or Thursday, whatever. But I take the liberty, when I can afford to, and when my work schedule aligns, because don't get me wrong, I'm not as luxurious or of a luxuriant lifestyle as you may imagine, given what I'm saying about myself. But I try to give myself, that week as my own personal self-care, spiritual, religious holiday, vacation time. Although, quite frankly, I've been happy to report to work literally on my birthday for the right people in the right shows at the right theater venues. And I have, without complaint. Because there's only a handful of things I really want to do on the anniversary of my arrival to planet Dirt. And one of those things is create theater. But I digress. This particular January 6th was the day before my birthday, and I overslept because of the insomnia jag that I've been on in a sort of recovery from staying up for New Year's and then sort of sleeping weirdly, sleeping well, but then, it disrupts your cycle. I woke up at like 12. At 12:34 p.m., I posted the following reaction to what I saw on TV. And although I'm sure I'll be accused of just parroting the mainstream media, I swear to you, no, I had not heard anyone. I can't claim no one had said this yet, but I had not heard anyone or seen anyone make this statement on any media platform yet. I literally just woken up, hadn't had any coffee yet, turned on the TV, don't even know which channel I was on. It's probably Spectrum News 1, the default one, because it was like everybody was live. The Capitol building, the steps thronging with people. It had already been breached. People were already inside. And it was in that liveness. And I think when I first turned it on, there was a good, long, prolonged period of breathless, anticipatory, just raw live video, whatever channel it was, and no commentary. And, I spent a good 5, 6, 7 minutes flipping through all the channels, not really listening to the words of any of the commentators, and just watching a mass of people that no matter what accusations anybody wants to lay at them, and many people are, throwing accusations and counter accusations and speculative, supposedly exculpatory theories, or supposed accusational or guilt proving conspiracy theories, blah blah blah. The full mess is happening. But in that moment, honest to God, one of my very first initial responses, for I had many at once, but the first two things I posted on Facebook while I was having a whirlpool of ideas read in the following way. January 6th, 12:34 p.m. And not that my own social media is news, but this is my show, right? You are tuning into the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's Almost Daily Zencast presents Good Morning Trumptopia. And this was literally what it felt to wake up to that morning in Trumptopia. And I wrote, quote, if BLM had done this. And at that point, I wasn't even entirely sure what this was. I had not heard the words insurrection, tyranny, blah, blah. Just people thronging at the Capitol, and doing the raw documentation of what they were doing. If BLM had done this, the Trump base would have lost their shit and called for law enforcement intervention or worse. But today, they are cheering this action on. Shake my head. The next thing I posted at 12:50 reads in the following manner. Black protesters - immediate and often violent law enforcement response. White protesters - slow, gentle, nonviolent law enforcement response. And the third thing I posted, I wish it wasn't the third thing I posted. It was neat to capture it, but it was the next real-time thing that I noticed. As I was going through the carousel of news media, I noticed that Laura Ingraham was on a call, phoning into Fox News, literally calling for Trump to bring in law enforcement and clear out his own protesters from the Capitol building. And although I haven't yet quoted from any of the commentary on these posts on my personal profile page, I do totally have to quote this one now because I have not seen it yet and it just sort of made my mind melt a little. I'm anonymously quoting the top comment, I think one of the only, there's 3 comments apparently. I don't know if it's the very first, but it's the first thing I can see from someone that I believe is a Facebook acquaintance that is connected to my Facebook page, not a public comment. But I digress. That part's kind of irrelevant. Someone relatively new, and which shall remain anonymous as is tradition on my podcast. Quote, I heard all the video was actually shot on a soundstage on the moon. Oh, the first time I looked at this and it made my brain melt a bit was I didn't see the moon part. Which, so for a hot second, my brain started to explore the implications of the potential reality that there was a believable, conspiracy theory floating that the storming of the Capitol building was fake video. Oh God, I totally just got lost into the comments under these things and for a hot second forgot I was live on the air, folks. It is a whirlwind of wild commentary, and I'm going to take some time really absorb it all. I haven't looked. I've just posted a bunch of things. But I want to kind of round out my thoughts on that. It's amazing how many different rationales are being peddled by those who must be described as the community from which the individuals that stormed the Capitol come from, right? And curiously, some of the same people that are now urgently pointing out that there was, and the proof is debatable, and in fact, some of the public statements from the original people making the claims have been retracted. But, there's people harping that Antifa, quote unquote, infiltrated the otherwise peaceful MAGA march from wherever Trump spoke to the public and said, where is the bit where I don't have it on me right now. Said the sort of insightful words that cannot be denied about marching all together down at the Capitol building and fighting and showing strength, right? And I keep saying I will defend anybody's right to protest, and I'm often accused of only defending the left's right to protest, which is categorically not true. I've never done that. Everybody has the right to protest. I have the right to protest. You have the right to protest. What no one has the right to do is threaten or enact violent thrashing of things and people and call it protest. And also, categorically speaking, to put a button on the events of January 6th, just to lay some groundwork, actually, there's no, in terms of the law, and I understand arguments about like not following the law when the law is not worth following, for sure. But in terms of the law that's like part and parcel and based on the Constitution, which these patriots who stormed the Capitol claim to believe in and love and uphold, it is against the law to storm and occupy, of all federal buildings, that one. To enter there at all, in any way, shape, or form, under any circumstances, with a weapon or with the intent to cause harm, is a felony. Now, it fascinates me that the Trump base, which is, co-opting the Republican Party, both of those overlapping entities claim to be adherents of and believers in, the law and order, the country being a nation of law, not of personal power, etc., etc., etc. The contradictions are profound and deep and far-reaching. And as I pointed out a little bit later at 2:04 p.m., part of the problem with all of this discourse and debate and arguing and these protests that become violent that then are, they're two things that appear to be one thing and therefore are really difficult to wrap it or build any to wrap our brains around and build solid consensus on. And that's this. At 2:04 p.m. I posted friendly reminder to everyone on all sides. And it's a meme that I've shared repeatedly. Some people are a little burnt out on seeing it, but it reads in big, bold letters, they, whoever they are, profiteer on conflict. And bold as it may be to say, I mean that both literally and allegorically and metaphorically. They gain power and benefit whenever there is conflict, even at the smallest scale. And thus, they whip up, foment, and instigate conflict at every level possible. Also, and let me wrap up this particular interim of today's show with this fun observation from a little bit in between those two sets of comments. At 1:46, I pointed out that there's a lot of Trump merch in that crowd. No matter what the fuck else analysis you want to make of the events of that day, one must ponder the questions and implications of all that merch being involved. Somebody or some groups of people on the fringe of this movement are making a lot of money. And that's just at the merch level, which reminds me and is, of course, that so much of this is sort of infringed upon, encroached upon, and surrounded by the extraction of money from the respective bases. And, I'm guilty of conducting a fundraiser in order to, improve and sustain my ability to produce this show through and beyond 2020 and 2021, which feels like one big clusterfuck of all one big thing, I think. Although I'm sure I'll feel differently by February. And, but yeah, like following the money is something that gets forgotten and or lost sight of by many folks when the antics and the shenanigans get this wacky and over the top. Wow. And in terms of the question of it being fate, which is something that I was going to address anyways on today's episode, because there's a lot of that going on. We've reached a really weird full cycle of the infiltrators exposed conundrum, which is, back in the height of the Black Lives Matter protests in response towards, to the various police brutality incidents that fomented all of that protesting and the coexisting activities that could be called other than protests, the riots and the looting and the violence and the dangerous things that, are a bit beyond the pale, but reasonable and understandable, right? Like, not reasonable and understandable. I mean, one can reasonably understand how people get to their violence, especially when one's contemplating the violence perpetuated by members of one's own political tribe. And it is, in fact, a fact that if one really steps back and outside of one's own political ideological box, it is clearly embedded in all of the cultural matrices, all of the cultural conditions and conditioning of every political tribe that, it's us versus them. You're either with us or you're against us over there with them, whoever the fuck they are, and who gives a fuck who they are, because they're all evil and vile and do not deserve to be treated like humans. Whether you personally feel like you've reached that level of objectification of other or not, I'm not accusing you or any individual of anything. I'm saying step outside of your boxes and look at the coding of it. Look at how it's written. Look at the it's a big process to go through, right? Because you got to step really far back and look at patterns of a lot of content that you've probably already consumed. But you got to do like a meta-analysis. There is indeed this duopoly, this a political ideological duopoly, and there is this two-facedness that encroaches on every camp, this hypocrisy that creeps into every cause, because there is the hubris in every cause to believe blindly that one's own cause alone can be righteous, right? And perhaps, just perhaps, as I try to slowly build out and express in my big meta theory of everything, that's how the echo chamber works, friends. It's like there's a hallway of mirrors for each political ideological paradigm, and each of those is nested in a hallway of mirrors of everyone else's ideological paradigm being fake. It was fascinating how things unfolded. At 5:12 p.m., I noted that Mitch McConnell had just warned the protesters that Congress will not be intimidated. And apparently, also a little bit earlier, I noted that they, meaning the two houses of Congress that had been stalled out, are back in session, and Pence just condemned today's violence. I'm gonna... Had to point out to a friend who's going off on the libs for being hypocritical. My post is about Mike Pence, not the libs, bro. Anyways, it's just, I don't want to get lost in the commentary, nested inside the commentary. The rest of the evening unfolded quite wildly, but one of the things that happened was that I had to take a personal phone call, which went on for quite a bit, and so I paused whatever news channel I was on when that phone call came back to it, continued watching it from where it was, didn't take into account or recalculate the new time difference, the new delay I was on, right? Because I had paused it. And my phone call went on for quite a bit. And that phone call is neither here nor there, not relevant to the historical events of the discourse. But as I was watching it, I got to a point where I was like, oh man, I'm going to be up late. And it was already late. And then I realized, wait a minute. What the fuck? And I changed the channel and boom, suddenly we were at the aftermath of the storming of Capitol building. And so at 12:34 a.m., I noted on the social media platform of choice for myself, despite the MAGA parade at the Capitol today. Ooh, and I misspelled it in that one. Dang it. Well, I guess it'd be right if I mean the capital city, right? Isn't that right? Capitol is a city. Capitol with an O is the building, I think. Or maybe I'm crazy. I'm just spinning wheels here. Either way, I misspelled it in that post. Maybe I'll fix it. Maybe I won't. The Electoral College votes have been counted anyways. Trump, 229. Biden, 306. The gears of the American institution continued to grind away as they were designed to grind away. And Trump, as commander-in-chief, as president of the country, had rightfully exhausted his legal options to oppose or question or otherwise have his, grievances addressed about the election. And the court system and the state electoral college, the state electoral college system worked as designed. So that's an interesting end note, right? These people who were in attendance at a Trump speech were whipped up with various comments by the entire lineup of speakers, which included Rudy Giuliani, who said something about a trial by combat, Don Jr., who said various things which I didn't write the notes down for, but go look it up. Go look up that speech. It's just hours from when suddenly they were tearing things off the walls and trashing furniture and basically ransacking and running amok in the Capitol. And we come to this full circle moment that I started to try to express and then got sidetracked on a minute ago, which is that emergent claims came from wherever they came from, that instigators of violence that were not officially members of the Trump base had infiltrated the march and somehow fomented and pushed the otherwise peaceful MAGA protesters into this thing. Conversely, quite curiously, early the next day, early the 7th, which didn't take long, there was another sort of developing theory and or question that sort of implies a thesis that there really should have been no way for this march to have gotten and broached the perimeter of this building as easily as they did without some kind of nefarious assistance or inside information or something. And there's variations. It's become its own little bucket of various conspiracy theories, from like there were QAnon embeds on the Capitol Hill police to it was all staged and faked on a soundstage in the moon. You know, like what? WTF? Trumptopia? Like the other interesting trend I saw, and you know, that is becoming stronger and more evident now, is this capacity to hold a duplicitous, double-think set of opinions about the event as a whole. To dismiss it as not their responsibility, right? Elements of the MAGA community are saying, that wasn't us, it's not our fault. That's Antifa, blah, blah, blah. And while there probably were Antifa people there, just like there were Trump supporters at Black Lives Matter protests causing problems and instigating violence, which these same folks denied at the time, right? And yet, despite all that, despite the poking and prodding, the wheels of little d American democracy weren't ripped to shreds and continued to grind along, and the ceremonial procedural recording of the Electoral College votes and certification, as it were, of the outcome of the election happened anyways, within hours of the protesters ultimately heeding Trump's second set of commands, which really truly exposes how two-faced Trump is. Hours before this event of rushing the Capitol building, he's literally telling them that they got to fight stronger, they got to show strength, and they got to go march to the Capitol building now, and that he was going to be there with them. How many times has he done that kind of thing? Gonna do this, doesn't show up, doesn't do it, blah, 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 right? How many promises has he promised? And then you have got to bend over backwards and pretzel your own logic to work out like what actually happened as a thing, as a bonus. And you find whatever silver lining you can find, right? As a Trump supporter. That's the way it works. That's how gaslighting gets you going when you buy into it. At 12:41 p.m., I was so flabbergasted by this contradiction of imagery, right? Think about it. The Capitol building and Washington, D.C. have not experienced anything like it since the War of 18... when the British came over and burnt down the fucking building. I've heard it referenced all day long the last 3 days, and I can't quite remember the back end digits. 1816, 1812, 1812, I think. I don't know, but whatever. 18-something, 1818, whatever it was, when the fucking British came over and torched the Capitol building, right? And they did. And, you know, not since then have any group of people breached security in a way that literally threatened the safety of the Congress persons working there. And no matter what you feel about those congresspersons, that's quite a trippy factoid. That's quite a turn of events. And yet they do so with, must be acknowledged, tragic as it is, the most minimal of fatalities and injuries. Tragedy, for sure. I'm not dismissing anyone's tragic end in this event, but you gotta admit that was pretty mild compared to how it could have been And given that the response and the way the building was cleared out was undeniably of a different nature and tone than the way in which, for example, protesters were cleared out of Lafayette Square so Trump could take a silly picture with the Bible he was holding the wrong way in front of a church that was unacceptably burnt out, right? Like somebody burnt that and that was stupid. And that should be prosecuted. I've rambled quite a bit, and we're going to make this a multi-parter because so much complexity to the course of events and the implications of what was going on. But I'll leave this episode to rest upon this thought that I noted yesterday at 12:58 a.m. And I mean this sincerely. A lot of Trump supporters that were not at the nation's Capitol building went to bed fantasizing about waking up to a, quote, successful MAGA coup or insurrection, and bunny ears quotes, and a, quote, second Trump term, and bunny ears quote. And those people, my dear friends, are in for one gnarly shock in the morning, and I am adding now in the coming days. If my suspicions and conclusions, logical conclusions, are on track. And I go on to humbly invite people to be kind and compassionate with them. They are, and I'm editing here, or should be, dealing with the trauma of realizing that Trump was manipulating them the entire time. I'm pleasantly surprised to see that comment got 4 shares and 21 comments. And I'm going to take some time in the intervening break between now and my subsequent segments of today's coverage to do the deep reading that I shouldn't let myself get sidetracked doing while live on the air. But thank you for your patience, folks. And of course, thank you for your support and participation both with this show and with my social media. Come on down to Facebook.com/Mr. Zeppo or the Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo or the Almost Daily Zencast. Or even more bluntly, come on down to Spreaker.com/show Zencast. Drop your comments. Actually, no one comes to comment on Spreaker, but such is life sometimes. I humbly thank you for tuning in and contemplating my wild, spiraling thoughts and curious questioneering. And I invite you, dear friends, I support you and applaud you, dear friends, in contemplating things deeply for yourself. If you agree, great. If you disagree, fine. Let's discuss it and build a new understanding. Which is possible, dear friends. The silver lining, the hope, and we'll come back and do a closer look at this. There are real-life testimonials making the viral rounds out there of people from opposite ends of these politically ideological, chaos-causing wedge issues that through compassionate listening, forgiveness, and consensus building and healing managed to reunite and bridge the gap between these monumental divides. We all are capable of doing that. It is not super casually easy, my dear friends. It does indeed require a little bit of hard work and humility and willingness to listen as much as you want to be heard. That's why I always invite you to come on out to my social media, folks. And hopefully as the show gets bigger, which it is, for which I am infinitely grateful and full of gratitude about, the more challenging it will be, but hopefully the more I'll be able to get a sort of workflow going, which is sort of the challenge I'm giving myself this next couple of weeks, so that your comments, probably anonymized. There's a conjugation for taking something and making it anonymous, not the club, but the state of anonymity in its original pre-anon days interpretations. But all right, guys. Wow, today's show was interesting and a little bit wobbly, but tune back in the not-too-distant future while we continue to discuss these things. But also consider, folks, history will come back and make some conclusions, and we must participate in the public discourse of that so that our various thoughts, opinions, considerations, concerns, and voices are heard, right? It's easy to complain that history is written by the victors and blah, 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 and this industry and that industry is corrupt. But if you're not contributing to the discourse in a meaningful way that helps build deeper, meaningful understanding of what's going on and how we can respond in a way that will elevate the human species instead of perpetuate the oppression of the human species, then we're not really doing enough, right? So, anyways, 71 minutes and 30 seconds. Holy cow. Folks, here's a little bit of more electronic music to consider, and then I'm gonna give myself and your ear holes a break. DJ Zed album next. A genuine trap groove pad remix entitled Under Each Step We Fall. This is what the duopoly echo chamber sounds like to me. The left is staging a coup. The right is staging a coup. Those were not real Trump supporters. Those were the real patriots taking the country back. It was all fake. It was all more real than you understand. It was Trump's master plan. It was Antifa master plan. It was BLM's master plan. It is all Trump's fault. It is all Biden's fault. Trump will win. Biden has won. And that, my dear friends, I humbly propose to you, is how duopoly echo chamber systems work.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.